For millennia, humanity labored. In a world without coffee, every dawn was a battle, fought with pure, raw will.
1 cup. That is all it takes today. Within 20 minutes, the caffeine reaches your bloodstream, your brain begins blocking the chemical that makes you feel tired, and suddenly the world feels sharper. Meetings become easier, driving becomes safer, studying feels possible again. Now imagine waking up tomorrow morning and discovering that coffee had never existed. Not just coffee. No espresso. No cappuccino. No latte. No energy drinks. No Coca-Cola. No tea. No caffeine pills. Nothing. For almost all of human history, this wasn't imagination. It was reality. Millions of people still had to wake before sunrise. Farmers still had fields to plow. Soldiers still had night watches to survive. Sailors still crossed oceans without sleep. Monks copied books by candlelight for hours after dark. Builders raised cathedrals stone by stone. Kings governed kingdoms. Mothers cared for children. Blacksmiths worked beside furnaces that burned hotter than modern fireplaces. Everyone became exhausted. But almost nobody had a reliable way to stay awake. That raises an uncomfortable question. How did civilization function before the world's favorite stimulant existed? The answer is stranger than most people imagine. Because before humanity discovered coffee, people relied on methods that ranged from surprisingly effective to unbelievably dangerous. Some chewed bitter leaves that caused hallucinations. Others drank fermented beer from sunrise until sunset. Entire civilizations organized work around short naps because staying awake all day simply wasn't realistic. And one empire accidentally discovered a plant that would eventually become so valuable that governments tried banning it, religious leaders declared it sinful, and merchants fought over it like gold. But that story begins long before coffee. It begins with the human brain itself. Every second you're awake, a chemical called adenosine slowly builds inside your brain. Think of it as your body's natural hourglass. The longer you remain awake, the more adenosine accumulates, creating that familiar heaviness behind your eyes and the irresistible desire to sleep. You cannot negotiate with it. You cannot ignore it forever. Eventually, your brain wins. For prehistoric humans, this biological system worked perfectly. They hunted during daylight, rested after sunset, and slept according to the natural rhythm of the sun. Artificial light barely existed. Nights were dark. Days were physically demanding. Most people simply became tired when darkness arrived. But civilization changed everything. Agriculture meant longer work days. Cities meant nighttime security patrols. Religion introduced midnight prayers. Trade created overnight travel. War demanded soldiers who could remain alert for days. Human society began asking people to stay awake longer than nature intended. The problem was obvious. The solution did not yet exist. The earliest civilizations discovered something interesting almost by accident. Fermented drinks. Today we associate alcohol with relaxation, but ancient beer was very different from the beverages sitting in modern refrigerators. In Mesopotamia nearly 5,000 years ago, beer contained relatively low alcohol levels and significant nutritional value. Because water was often contaminated, lightly fermented beer became safer to drink than many rivers and wells. Workers drank it. Farmers drank it. Children sometimes drank diluted versions. Egyptian laborers building the pyramids reportedly received beer as part of their daily wages. Oddly enough, small amounts of alcohol sometimes helped exhausted workers continue labor simply because it reduced discomfort, anxiety, and hunger. It did not truly eliminate fatigue, but it made difficult work feel slightly easier. It was hardly an ideal solution. Drink too much and productivity collapsed. Drink too little and exhaustion remained. Humanity was still searching for something better. Across Asia, another solution slowly emerged. Not coffee. Tea. Legend says the discovery happened around 2737 BCE when Chinese Emperor Shen Nong was boiling water beneath a tree. Leaves drifted into the pot, producing a fragrant drink unlike anything people had tasted before. Whether the story is true hardly matters. What matters is what happened next. Over centuries, tea became woven into Chinese civilization. Buddhist monks quickly noticed something remarkable. Unlike alcohol, tea sharpened concentration instead of dulling it. Long hours of meditation became easier. Copying manuscripts became less exhausting. Reading sacred texts late into the night suddenly felt possible. Without understanding chemistry, they had discovered caffeine. They simply called it tea. The drink spread slowly across East Asia, becoming one of history's most influential beverages. Yet for thousands of years, almost nobody in Europe had ever tasted it. While China perfected tea ceremonies, Europeans continued relying on sleep whenever possible. Or at least I tried to. Because medieval sleep looked nothing like modern sleep. Historians examining medieval diaries, monastery schedules, and household records discovered something astonishing. Many Europeans did not sleep once each night. They slept twice. People commonly experienced what historians call segmented sleep. They went to bed shortly after sunset, slept for roughly 4 hours, woke naturally around midnight, remained awake for an hour or two, then returned to bed for another 4 hours before dawn. The period between these two sleeps became surprisingly productive. People prayed, read, visited neighbors, had quiet conversations. Some even believed children conceived during this midnight waking period were healthier because both parents were fully rested. The modern expectation of 8 uninterrupted hours simply did not exist. It evolved much later, largely because industrial society demanded fixed work schedules. Without coffee, people adapted their lives around biology instead of forcing biology to adapt to work. But there was one place on Earth where something extraordinary was quietly growing in the mountains. A small evergreen tree, covered with bright red berries. For centuries, almost nobody paid attention to it. Soon, it would change the history of human civilization forever. For centuries, those bright red berries grew wild in the highlands of Ethiopia, unnoticed by most of the world. According to one of history's most famous legends, a young goat herder named Kaldi began noticing something unusual about his animals. Whenever his goats ate the berries from a certain shrub, they became unusually energetic. Instead of settling down for the evening, they continued running, jumping, and climbing long after sunset. Curious, Kaldi reportedly tasted the berries himself and experienced the same burst of alertness. Whether the story is true remains uncertain. Historians first recorded it hundreds of years after the supposed events, but like many legends, it points toward a real historical truth. Somewhere in East Africa, people discovered that this remarkable plant had the power to keep them awake. The berries eventually reached Yemen, carried across the Red Sea by merchants and travelers. There something extraordinary happened. Sufi Muslim monks who often spent entire nights praying and meditating began drinking a dark beverage made from roasted coffee beans. Their religious practice demanded long hours of wakefulness, and coffee provided exactly what they needed. Unlike alcohol, it sharpened the mind instead of clouding it. Unlike chewing bitter herbs, it produced no dangerous hallucinations. For the first time in history, people possessed a drink that could reliably fight fatigue without severely impairing judgment. The monks quickly realized they had discovered something valuable. Coffee spread through monasteries, then into nearby towns, and eventually across the Arabian Peninsula. By the 15th century, coffee houses had begun appearing in cities like Mecca and Cairo. These were unlike anything the world had seen before. People gathered not to become intoxicated, but to remain awake. They discussed politics, religion, philosophy, literature, business, and science. Travelers exchanged news from distant lands. Merchants negotiated deals that lasted deep into the night. Poets performed their newest works while scholars debated ideas that would later shape civilizations. This was revolutionary. For thousands of years, taverns had been places where minds became duller as the evening progressed. Coffee houses produced the opposite effect. The longer people stayed, the sharper the conversations often became. Historians sometimes call these early coffee houses schools of the wise because they became informal universities where knowledge spread rapidly between ordinary citizens. Not everyone welcomed this new drink. Religious authorities in several regions became suspicious. Some believed coffee stimulated the mind too much. Others worried that large gatherings of politically active citizens might threaten those in power. In Mecca, local officials temporarily banned coffee in the early 16th century, arguing that it encouraged dangerous discussions. Similar bans appeared elsewhere throughout the Islamic world. Ironically, these attempts often made coffee even more popular. Once authorities declare something controversial, curiosity usually does the rest. European travelers eventually encountered coffee during trade with the Ottoman Empire. Their first reactions were mixed. Many described it as bitter, black, and unpleasant. Some clergy even referred to it as the bitter invention of Satan. A beverage that kept people awake while originating from Muslim lands naturally attracted suspicion in Christian Europe. According to tradition, the controversy reached Pope Clement VIII around the year 1600. Advisors reportedly urged him to ban coffee before it spread across Christian societies. Instead, the Pope asked to taste it himself. After drinking it, legend claims he enjoyed the flavor so much that he supposedly declared it too delicious to leave exclusively to non-Christians. Whether those exact words were spoken remains debated, but one fact is certain. Coffee was not banned. Instead, it began its extraordinary journey across Europe. Within decades, coffee houses appeared in Venice, London, Paris, and Vienna. Their influence extended far beyond simple beverages. In London alone, hundreds of coffee houses emerged during the 17th century. Each developed its own identity. Some attracted merchants, others welcomed scientists. Writers gathered in particular establishments while politicians preferred others. People even joked that London's coffee houses functioned as unofficial government offices because so much information circulated inside them. One famous coffee house eventually evolved into something even larger. Edward Lloyd's Coffee House became the preferred meeting place for sailors, ship owners, merchants, and insurers exchanging information about overseas voyages. Over time, those conversations developed into what the world now knows as Lloyd's of London, one of history's most influential insurance markets. A simple cup of coffee indirectly helped build one of the world's largest financial institutions. Meanwhile, Europe's intellectual life experienced a transformation historians still debate today. The 17th and 18th centuries witnessed the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment, periods during which science, philosophy, mathematics, and political thought advanced at extraordinary speed. Coffee did not create these movements by itself, but it certainly supported them. Instead of beginning the day with weak beer or wine, which had been common for centuries because drinking water was often unsafe, educated Europeans increasingly started their mornings with coffee. They exchanged mild intoxication for heightened alertness. Some historians have argued that this cultural shift mattered enormously. A society fueled by caffeine rather than alcohol thinks differently. Ideas travel faster when conversations remain clear. Business decisions improve when minds stay focused. Scientific experiments require careful observation, not drunken guesswork. Coffee quietly became one of the invisible engines powering modern civilization. Yet while cities embraced this remarkable drink, most ordinary workers still faced the same challenge that had haunted humanity for thousands of years. Exhaustion never disappeared. Farmers rose before dawn. Sailors endured endless watches. Factory workers during the Industrial Revolution often labored 12 to 16 hours a day. Coffee helped them remain awake, but it could not replace sleep itself. And that distinction would become critically important. Because humanity was about to discover that staying awake longer always carries a price. The Industrial Revolution would demand workers who ignored their natural limits. Factories would begin operating day and night. Railroads would require engineers to remain alert for impossible shifts. Entire economies would start running on caffeine. And for the first time in history, exhaustion itself would become a global business. By the beginning of the 20th century, coffee had conquered much of the world. Factories served it before sunrise, offices brewed it throughout the day, soldiers carried it into war, students relied on it during examinations, doctors drank it during overnight shifts, writers filled entire manuscripts beside steaming cups that rarely left their desks. What had started as a wild berry growing in the mountains of Ethiopia had become one of the most valuable agricultural products on Earth. Yet the greatest irony of coffee's history is this: it never actually solved humanity's oldest problem. It only delayed it. Caffeine does not create energy, it borrows it. Inside your brain, the chemical adenosine continues building throughout the day whether you drink coffee or not. Caffeine simply blocks the receptors that detect it. The tiredness never disappears, it waits patiently until the caffeine wears off. Then, often all at once, the exhaustion returns. For centuries, people believed coffee possessed almost magical powers. Some physicians praised it as medicine. Others warned it would destroy the nervous system. The truth, as science eventually discovered, lies somewhere in between. Coffee can improve alertness, concentration, reaction time, and short-term performance. But it cannot replace sleep. Every hour of rest your body misses eventually demands repayment. Industrial society often ignored this lesson. As factories spread across Europe and North America, employers realized something remarkable. Workers fueled by coffee could remain productive for longer hours. Morning coffee breaks gradually became part of daily routines. Railroads served coffee to engineers before overnight journeys. Telegraph operators drank it through endless shifts. Newspaper printers worked until dawn preparing the next morning's edition. Hospitals never truly slept because doctors now had a reliable stimulant that helped them continue working long after their bodies wanted rest. Coffee quietly reshaped the rhythm of civilization. Before caffeine became universal, darkness usually meant life slowed down. After coffee, darkness became just another work shift. Entire cities began operating 24 hours a day. Electric lighting made nighttime visible. Coffee made it bearable. Together, they transformed modern civilization. The economic impact became astonishing. Today, coffee is among the most traded agricultural commodities on Earth, with millions of farmers depending upon its cultivation across South America, Africa, and Asia. Entire national economies were built around coffee plantations. Fortunes were made. Governments rose and fell protecting coffee exports. Global trade routes expanded partly because people everywhere developed the same daily habit. One drink connected continents. But coffee also revealed something fascinating about human psychology. Within only a few generations, people forgot life before it. Ask someone today how they begin the morning, and millions will answer almost automatically. Coffee. Not because every person enjoys the taste. Not because every culture always drank it. But because habits quietly become traditions, and traditions eventually feel like necessities. History is filled with inventions that disappear into everyday life. We stop noticing electricity until the lights go out. We stop noticing indoor plumbing until the water stops running. We stop noticing refrigerators until they break. Coffee belongs to that same category. Its greatest success is that it became invisible. Few people think about the centuries before it existed. Few imagine monks struggling to stay awake through midnight prayers without caffeine. Few picture sailors fighting exhaustion beneath freezing skies using nothing but cold seawater splashed across their faces. Few remember farmers relying on segmented sleep because remaining awake from dawn until midnight simply wasn't possible. For thousands of years, humanity adapted to tiredness. Then coffee taught humanity to resist it. Perhaps that explains why its history feels so extraordinary. It did not conquer nations with armies. It did not build monuments of stone. It did not invent machines or discover continents. Instead, it quietly changed billions of ordinary mornings. It helped scholars finish books that might otherwise have remained unwritten. It helped scientists remain awake through experiments that changed the world. It helped merchants negotiate deals, doctors save lives, writers complete novels, and students pursue knowledge deep into the night. Civilization did not become intelligent because of coffee. But it certainly became more awake. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson hidden inside its history. Every generation believes its daily routines have always existed. Yet almost everything surrounding us, the toothbrush beside the sink, the toilet paper in the bathroom, the clock on the wall, the refrigerator in the kitchen, and the cup of coffee warming your hands each morning, is astonishingly new when measured against the hundreds of thousands of years humans have walked the earth. For nearly all of that time, nobody knew what coffee was. People still built civilizations. They still crossed oceans. They still fought wars. They still wrote poetry. They still changed history. They simply did it while tired. The next time you reach for your morning coffee, pause for a moment. That small black drink is more than a beverage. It is the final chapter in a story that began with exhausted farmers, sleepless monks, wandering traders, curious goat herders, and a forgotten tree growing quietly in the Ethiopian mountains. Long before coffee became the world's favorite drink, humanity survived without it. After coffee arrived, the world never truly slept again.